to our Ayurvedic. Welcome everybody for coming to our Ayurvedic approach to yoga. My name is Kathy Eichinger. I am just starting us out as we get ready before Heather comes in for this beautiful presentation that she has set. Just to go over just a couple things. As we're getting ready, if you would please just mute with your camera off at this point, and then we can be able to see all the info that will be as far as the slides. Of course, we'll have chat that will be up as we come into this a little bit later with any questions for the Q&A at the end. Feeling free to raise your hand too with question. Please know that this is recorded. So with it being recorded, then too, anything is optional with being able to have or to be on camera. So that's entirely up to you. And again, with everything being recorded. So next slide, Heather. Thank you.
Okay.
The Ayurvedic Association of Wisconsin is putting on this webinar. We were founded in 2016 as a grassroots organization, bringing practitioners and those that love Ayurveda together as a group. And we have a board of dedicated members right now that are helping to continue our vision. If we can take a peek with looking at our next slide for education for all and supporting Ayurvedic practitioners. So we're trying to build and promote awareness and education and recognition of Ayurveda, its principles, its benefits and practices as a system of healing. And then also supporting and really coming into community as the state to be able to find a place where we can gather as those that are interested in Ayurveda. And coming into our mission, it's our Ayurvedic community for Wisconsin. So it's, again, rooted in providing our education and connection and our resources. And we're committed to serving both the professionals of Ayurveda and those interested in using Ayurveda on their healing path. And some of the ways that you can participate, if you would like to, is to join a committee. Everything is volunteer that we're working with. We have 4 different types of committees, whether it's education and outreach, which puts on a webinar like this along with events. And then we also have marketing and membership. When you take a peek then also at our website, we do have ways that people can become involved in membership, either at a community or student participation, an Ayurvedic professional, or business and organization. And all this is really on our website. And I'll put in a link toward the end of our presentation that'll have the website, so you can be able to click on that and go to that. In addition to our membership levels, we also ask if someone would like to support the Ayurveda Association of Wisconsin, and we definitely gratefully accept donations to be able to continue our mission. And as we come into today's presentation, I would like to tell you a little bit about Heather. And Heather is the founder of Her Wellbeing Ayurveda and Yoga. She is a certified Ayurvedic practitioner, a professional member of the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, NAMA, an experienced registered yoga teacher with Yoga Alliance. She is also a graduate of Kanyakumari Ayurveda and Yoga Center and a Kripalo yoga teacher. And we are very fortunate to also have Heather involved in our board as vice president. And I'm so excited for tonight. This presentation is beautiful as well as extremely informative. And Heather, I will let you take over from here.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for that great introduction. We'll start my presentation with a mantra. This is a peace mantra that is commonly shared between students and teachers or community members to wish for peace together. So it goes something like this in Sanskrit. So you can just listen in and I will read the translation after. Om Sahana Avatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinaditamastu Mahavidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May we be protected together. May we be nourished together. May we be empowered to work together. May our studies illuminate us. May no obstacle arise between us. Om, peace, peace, peace. And with that, I'll start my presentation. Kathy, if you're not already muted, I am getting some ambient noise, I think, from your direction. Let me see if I can. Yeah, you're good. All right, thanks. All right, well, starting with this big topic, the cultural appropriation of yoga. So yoga has been borrowed from this ancient wisdom and divorced from its original intent. It's largely being taught as exercise. So that's what I mean as the appropriation of yoga. It is intended as a way to find harmony in the mind-body system, and also to ascend a personal spiritual path, a sacred path. And eventually this leads to union with universal consciousness. So that's a lot right there. Yoga means unity, or to unite, coming from the root of yuj. And this is to yoke, or to bring together. So it's to bring together peace between the body and mind, but also between the individual and the bigger picture, if you will. So we're going to start the presentation with this thought in mind, that yoga has, we've embraced this, the physical practice of yoga. And this presentation is really all about how much more there is that yoga offers us. So there are many ways to respect yoga's roots. And tonight I will dip a toe into each one of these buckets, starting with the 8-limbed path. This comes from the Yoga Sutras written by Patanjali in early centuries CE. And Patanjali wrote for us through the path, this 8-limbed path, a model of spiritual growth. So this is how we find meaningful purpose in yoga practice. And it connects us, again, with this bigger picture. And then there's also the yamas and the niyamas. These come from the 8-limbed path. And we look at these specifically to look at the various practices of yoga, only of which one has anything to do with a physical practice. So we'll take another look at that. And then thirdly, and this is where we'll go into a little bit more depth, is learning about yoga's sister science, Ayurveda. And if you're new to Ayurveda, Ayurveda is a holistic system of healing that honors the connection between body, mind, and spirit. So Ayurveda teaches us to honor not only our own nature, our own personal nature, but the natural rhythms in our environment as well. So it teaches us about how to harmonize with nature in general. This is how we can cultivate a personal connection with a yoga practice that's attuned to our unique needs, since we are all very unique individuals. So really, there's no cookie cutter approach in yoga. And those needs may be physical, of course, but they're also mental and emotional. So we'll start with Patanjali's 8-limbed path of the Yoga Sutras. So these, what we see here, are all practices of yoga. And you'll see that number 1, we begin the first intended practice of yoga is yama, or social ethics. This is how we interact with the world around us. Social ethics. And then secondly, niyamas. This is more of a personal practice in how we take care of ourselves and how we propel ourselves forward along our personal path, whatever that might be. And then it's not until these first 2 practices that are taken on and embraced, then we come to asana, which are the physical postures. Bear in mind, asana means seat. So it is pointing directly to the act of meditation and doing these different postures, the end goal being to facilitate greater ease in meditation. So even the physical practice facilitates or leads to a deeper self-study, which is meditation. And then after that comes pranayama. This is breath control. In Ayurveda, we understand breath as prana, the vital life force. So this is how we can cultivate that life force and also experience longevity. It's believed as we cultivate the breath, the prana, the vital life force, we can also enjoy longevity from this practice. Moving on, number 5, we have pratyahara, the practice of withdrawal. This is the way that we might care for our senses and our mind by withdrawing our senses from stimuli like sounds, sight, smells, feelings, anything that interfaces with our senses. So there are practices to cultivate this point. And then we have dharana, which is concentration. We must learn how to focus on one point before we are expected to learn how to meditate when we are focusing our attention on the breath. So concentration is critical as a predecessor for meditation or dhyana. And finally, and this is not the end of the road, but number 8 of the 8-limbed path is samadhi. And this is the goal of yoga, unity with universal consciousness. And you might do that using any of these practices. So again, unifying with the bigger picture, that which is that we are a part of. So again, just to emphasize that asana, or the physical practice of yoga, is only a small part of the overall yoga practice. And any of these limbs can be an entry point. And they can also be a practice, a yoga practice in and of itself. So it's not necessarily required that we take on asana or physical posture. So this makes yoga more universal and also more accessible to all. Moving on from there, looking at the yamas, the first yoga practice. So there's a reason why we practice these social ethics first before we take on the physical postures. Number one, and this is my favorite that I love to teach in my yoga classes, is Ahimsa, translated as non-violence. You might see, if you're familiar with the Niyamas, you might have seen these before. I translate these a little differently based on an author of a book that I will mention in a little while. But what she does, her name is Nishala Joy Devi, she takes the Yoga Sutras and she looks at them through the lens of divine feminine, and she also looks at the yamas and the niyamas through a positive lens. So instead of saying nonviolence, we're considering compassion or even unconditional love. And remember that these can also be directed at the self, not just in social situations, but also towards ourselves. So we learn self-compassion as well, and unconditional self-love. The next would be truthfulness, satya, then responsibility, asteya, aparigraha, simplicity. The next are niyamas. These are more about what's happening in the personal realm. Saucha is purity, purity of thought, purity of intention, purity in practice as well. Then we have santosha, which is gratitude, or you may have also heard this as contentment. Someone could have simply a gratitude practice, and that could be a yoga practice in of itself. Tapas is discipline. This speaks of the heat and brilliance behind, you might think of this as motivation towards our personal evolution, towards or embracing this personal evolution or journey. That is yoga practice. That is yoga. And finally, Ishvara Pranidhana, which is devotion and dedication to God or source or universal consciousness, however you'd like to think it. Again, it's reiterating this unity with what is bigger than all of us, but that also connects us as one. So those are the yamas and the niyamas, the two first yoga practices. So just to review, these are things that anyone can take on. And in the sutras, there are lots of different ways to explore each one of these yoga practices, depending on where you would like to begin. By the sustained practice of the 8 limbs of yoga, the impurities are destroyed and the light of wisdom, discrimination shines forth. So says Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras. So shifting gears here a little bit, just laying some foundation from the sutras. We're going to look at the problems with yoga exercise. And by that, I mean adhering to a physical practice. So number one, obviously it's going to ignore individual needs. There's a lack of personal growth or spiritual connection. And we miss out on this body-mind balance. That is the intention of yoga. And it does not prepare us very well for meditation. If you ever tried meditating after an exercise class, you'll discover that that is not easy to do. So these yoga practices are all the limbs are preparing us for meditation, concentration, so on and so forth. And then again, the focus is primarily on the physical body. So we're going to lose out on all of these other more subtle and very significant benefits. And there are risks as well when we look at yoga as exercise. Certainly there is a risk for injury when we apply the no pain, no gain approach to yoga. Then we tend to push ourselves beyond our boundaries. And with that, we break the first rule of the yamas, which is compassion or unconditional love towards ourselves. So in yoga practice, I lead my students to check in with that first yama repeatedly so that we're staying in our zone of safety and ease and comfort. And that way we prevent injury when we're checking in with ourselves and being honest with ourselves about what is available to us in any given moment. There can be inflammation. This intensity of yoga exercise can burn the subtle aspect of the mind, and it can inflame the body. And this inflammation can also lead to lowered immunity. And we might also have raised cortisol levels. That's a stress hormone that can also lower immunity. And then we also have these fiery emotions and fierce competition with yourself or others that may not be helpful. Again, these are all that's working against the yamas and the niyamas, the first two tenets of practices of yoga. So how do we advance our practice beyond this physical aspect? So Dr. Frawley authored this book that I mentioned below, Yoga for Your Type. And these are his suggestions, and I've added one myself. So number one, he says, incorporate the deeper aspects or limbs of yoga, including pranayama, mantra, and meditation. Very, very important to balance the physical aspect with the less physical ones. And he says even to spend as much time, if not more, on these deeper aspects, such as pranayama, mantra, and meditation, as on asana practice. So he cautions against emphasizing the physical over the non-physical practices. So my addition is always ending the physical portion or asana portion of yoga practice with at least 5 minutes of relaxation. We also know this as shavasana. This is the final pose of a yoga practice when we invite our practice to integrate into our body-mind system so that we can absorb the good effects of our practice. And also ending yoga practice in silent contemplation, which is a practice unto itself that we know as meditation. And remember that yoga ethics and principles relate to everyday life too. So just as you're thinking of the 8 limbs and the yamas and the niyamas on the yoga mat, the invitation is to consider them throughout the rest of your day. And that is also huge unity, bringing the practice off of the mat, if you will. Okay, moving on to Ayurveda. This is where we'll spend a little bit more time talking about yoga's sister science. Ayurveda teaches us that yoga is most effective when it's tailored to suit the needs of the individual and also to address where they are in their spiritual journey. So to personalize your practice, it is helpful to know your Ayurvedic Constitution. And the Sanskrit term for that is prakriti. So this acknowledges the dosha or the energy that has the most substantial influence in your body-mind system. It's either vata, pitta, or kapha. And we're going to talk about the doshas in the next slide. Now that is a good to know. It is also helpful to know which dosha or energy, vata, pitta, or kapha, is in excess for whatever reason. This can be because of diet or lifestyle or any particular habits or the season, because the seasons will usher in a different dominant dosha. So we may also take this into consideration. This is known as Vikriti. And if you don't know which dosha is strongest or most in excess, then I always say to turn to the season. Whichever dosha is in charge of that season, that's the dosha that you can work with, both on and off of the yoga mat and in everyday life. So taking a closer look at the three doshas, we have Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Now, before we even get there, I should mention the 5 natural elements. Those are smaller circles that you see above the doshas, those being air, ether, fire, water, and earth. These are the Pancha Mahabhutas. These are the great elements of nature. And what happens is that Vata, or air and ether, condense to become Vata, and fire and water combine to make Pitta, fire being the dominant energy there, and then earth and water combining to make Kapha. So the Pancha Mahabhutas condense into these 3 doshas or energies. So you may have also heard the doshas referred to as body types. And that's another word for saying Ayurvedic Constitution. So let's start with Vata. Vata is, because it contains air and ether energies, it's very cold, windy, and very mobile. So when we talk about balancing the doshas, which is what we want to do in yoga practice or in any practice, is we want to work with its opposites. So in Ayurveda, we have the principle of like increases like. So if we want to decrease this energy, because it's usually in excess, then we'll focus on using its opposite. So in this case for Vata, we turn to the qualities of warm, slow, and stable. A suitable mantra for a Vata body type or excess is slow down. And for Pitta, consists mainly of fire. Secondarily, there's water there as well, but it's mainly fire and its quality is hot and spreading. So you can kind of think of, where Vata is airy, Pitta is more like an acid, burning and intense and spreading, right? So to balance Pitta's fiery energy, its opposites for balancing would be cool, slow, and stable. Notice that Vata and Pitta are actually fairly similar. They're both very light and mobile. They're pretty fast moving, except that Vata is very cold and Pitta is hot. So that's a main difference between the two. A mantra for a Pitta yoga practice or person or lifestyle might be, take it easy. And finally, there's Kapha. Kapha is very different. It's made up of earth and water. And so those qualities are cool. They're moist and heavy, like substantial, not heavy in a bad way. This is heavy in a good way. And so to balance Kapha's energy, we can use the opposites of heating and lightness. So again, we're working with the opposites to find balance. And for a Kapha constitution or imbalance, we might use the mantra of lighten up. So that's my crash course on the Pancha Mahabhutas and the 3 doshas and how to balance them all in one slide. So I do have some further tips. These are specifically for physical yoga practice, if you have that kind of a practice. For Vata, to balance this airy constitution or imbalance, we're talking Vikriti, Prakriti, or Vikriti, we want a warming practice with grounding postures that improve endurance, flexibility, and strength. So these are the things that will help a Vata person feel better. So in particular, the poses I like for Vata are standing poses. That's with both feet firmly on the ground, and also seated poses or poses on the ground to take advantage of the earth element, bringing that earth element into our yoga practice. For pitta types or imbalances, it's important that we choose a cooling practice. And what does that mean exactly? It means that it's not going to be as warming as the Vata practice, or at least it's not going to be hot. We shouldn't be dripping sweat in a pitta friendly practice. We want to stay cool, we want to stay dry, and we want to keep things easygoing. So this also means a grounding practice for pitta, because just like Vata, it's very light and mobile. And poses that turn down anger and intensity. So moving away from anything that feels really intense or fiery, anything that really pushes your buttons. So poses that do this are things like supine poses. These are poses on your back, or they can be poses on your belly. They can be any seated pose or pose on the ground. Again, we want to make use of that earth element and bring the kapha element into the yoga practice. For kapha, again, it's very different because the elements are very different. Instead of light and airy and mobile and cool or warm, we have kind of a neutral temperature, but it is a heavier energy. So we want to heat things up and find a practice that's more stimulating and poses that are more uplifting. What's interesting that I find is in most yoga studios, what is being taught is this, is a practice that would be fantastic for kapha prakriti or vikriti, because most of these classes are very heating and stimulating. We call that rajasic. If you're familiar with that term, it's very agitating. Unfortunately, the majority of people who show up for yoga classes are either Vata or Pitta constitutions. This is what I've seen in my teaching. I don't see as many Kapha people coming to yoga studios. It is mostly Vata and Pitta types. So unfortunately, they get a Kapha practice, which can possibly drive any excess doshas into overdrive. So this is the risk of not knowing, not having this knowledge, this wisdom to merge with yoga, as we may actually be disservicing our students instead of offering a practice that is harmonizing the body-mind system. So it's a problem. It's a problem that I intend to, one class at a time, correct. There's also a seasonal approach. So as we welcome fall, we welcome the Vata dosha, and that will last throughout fall and also early winter. And it is going to infuse this time with its airy, windy, cold, kind of agitating energy. And this is going to last all through winter, with the exception of, and this is a typo, with the exception of late winter, because late winter will start to shift over to the kapha season, which is usually a great relief for many Vata constitutions. So this is the energy that we're faced with. And of course, we don't want to use more cold, wind, spacey energy. We're going to balance with the opposite. So I have some fall lifestyle and yoga tips here. These are my favorites. Number one, keep it simple. The Vata dosha does not like being busy for busy's sake, right? So keep it simple. Also, another one of my favorites, less is more. And Of course, stay warm. That's an easy one. The theme is nourish. So with this windiness and dryness and coldness, we're turning indoors, we're cooking our foods, we're making more soups and stews. It's a very nourishing time to turn inward and support ourselves. And the mantra is also slow down. Slowing down is one of the best things you can do for the Vata energy and the Pitta energy, because it is fast moving and it becomes more agitated the more things we do. So again, this is not just for yoga, but it's also in lifestyle. Taking a look at what it feels like to have a balanced practice. If you don't know what that's like, overall, and this comes from Dr. Frawley as well, overall, we're looking for good digestion and elimination. So we're digesting our food well, we're eliminating waste on a regular basis. We have a bright complexion. It's shining through our skin. There's a feeling of lightness, of clarity, and calm. And then here's what we can expect for the different body types or constitutions, or if there's an excess. For Vata, we can experience hopefully less stiffness in the joints. Muscles can feel stronger. We can have a greater sense of groundedness and just a comfortable sense of warmth. We don't want to feel overheated because that can be very fatiguing, but to feel warm is very, very soothing for Vata. And then conversely, true for Pitta, to feel cool, to feel like we haven't pushed ourselves to our limits is highly useful for Pitta. So we can feel cool, calm, open, patient. I think patience is a true sign that Pitta is balanced. Tolerance, and of course, we want less inflammation, less stress. For Kapha, there is a sense of lightness, a sense of energy, less congestion, which is common for Kapha, less mucus and excess water weight. And then for an imbalanced practice, of course, we're looking at the opposites to be true. Overall, we can have pain, we can have tension, we can have headaches, we can have indigestion. So these are the risks that we run when we're working with the doshas in a way that are not based in Ayurvedic wisdom. For Vata, we might have more pain and stiffness. We might even have anxiety or insomnia or even constipation. This is a very typical Vata type of indigestion. And for Pitta, they might have more heat, which is not good, more tension, more anger and irritability. Not good. That's not where we want to go. That's not following our yamas and our niyamas. Kapha can have more congestion, more mucus, more feeling of dullness and heaviness. So these are signs that we're moving in the wrong direction, that instead of balancing the doshas, we're pushing them further into excess. Myra Lewin says, the more you let Ayurveda and yoga be the basis for your living, the easier living gets. I love that. Okay, now I know that's a lot. It's a lot of material. Let's just take a moment to share a breath, a nourishing breath in through the nose and let it out of the nose or the mouth. Maybe it feels good to let out a sigh. Whew. It's a lot of information. And just trusting that whatever information that's most useful for you will be absorbed, digested well. Now to wrap up, I do have some resources that I'd like to share with you. If you're familiar, there are dosha quizzes that you can take, and these A good dosha quiz will tell you the leading dosha or energy, vata, pitta, or kapha in your constitution or body type. Personally, I like Banyan Botanicals quiz. They call it a personal Ayurvedic profile. So you can go to their website and sign up to take their quiz. And I also have an offering for this. It's called a self-discovery guide. This is a free download that has a couple of assessments, self-assessments in it that will help you identify Prakriti and Vikriti. And you can get that at my website at herwellbeing.com. Okay, and Teresa is sharing the link. Thank you. And if you're interested in studying the sutras, which I highly recommend, the book that I refer to is called The Secret Power of Yoga by Nishala Joy Devi. The subtitle is A Woman's Guide to the Heart and Spirit of the Yoga Sutras. However, I suggest it for anyone. It's a really lovely modern look at the sutras, phrase by phrase. And she also offers wonderful exercises and journaling prompts along the way as you study. And you can go to her website, abundantwellbeing.com. She has a book. There's also an audiobook, and she has an online course, and all of that's very affordable. If you really want to dive in and make a meal out of this, Yoga International does offer a master course for the Yoga Sutras. So that is a multiple hour course, but if you are a RYT with Yoga Alliance, you can get continuing education credits for that. So it would be well worth your time. And finally, if you want to contact me, the best way to do that is go to my website, herwellbeing.com. I have lots of resources there for you if you'd like to keep learning about this beautiful intersection between Ayurveda and yoga. I teach at the Heart Revival Center in St. Francis, Wisconsin, if you'd like to join me there. I teach a weekly class on Wednesdays, and I also teach Ayurveda workshops. One I'll mention that's coming up next week on Thursday. It is customary to do a seasonal cleanse for fall. So I am doing a group cleanse at the Heart Revival, and it's going to be in October. So there is a free webinar for that that's taking place on Thursday, a week from tomorrow, on the 29th. It's happening in the afternoon at 2:30. And it's no problem if you can't be there. It will be recorded. If you register, you'll get the replay. So that's coming up next week to prepare for an Ayurvedic home cleanse to do on your own, but in a group setting with practitioner support. I think that's pretty much it. That's all that I have today. I want to thank you for your attention and for your time. And I am going to hand it back to Kathy.
Heather, thank you. That was awesome. You had so much information, and I know we'll get into this point where we'll start in with the Q&As, but that was wonderful. You did a great job. Thank you so much for all your education and your keeping us seeing the connection between yoga and Ayurveda. So thank you. I did want to mention just a bit, Heather, if you'll go to that next slide for me, that for the AAW, we do have another event coming up, another webinar, and that is going to be on the 23rd of October. We come into a time where it's National Ayurveda Day, so we have a date saved for that for the 23rd of October. So you'll be seeing other information being mailed out to you that you'll be aware of. Raka will be putting together chanting for us, and we're going to be doing a couple different chants for that, the Gayatri mantra, and also to be able to get together back in community again. So we hope we'll be able to see you for our next webinar, which is the 23rd of January. Excuse me, I said that wrong. 23rd of October. My fault. My fault. And also, the webinars themselves, we're putting these out as a free webinar, but if you would like to support the AAW, there is in the chat the information for a link to our PayPal account for a donation, or for those of you listening to this that, in a taped version, you can also find this on PayPal at WI Ayurveda. And you can be able to make a contribution to the AAW, which we would gratefully appreciate if that works for you. And then I'm wondering if anybody has any questions, if they can type them into the chat. You can raise your hand, optional if you'd like to put your camera on or off.
I'm going to turn my camera on, if you don't mind staying muted for now, but you're welcome to take yourself off of basically turn your camera on. Let me see, do we have any? We do have a couple more slides. So I'm just trying to think if I should stop sharing and reshare, or if anyone wants to come on camera. Sorry, it's late. If anyone wants to come on camera, then we can move into gallery mode depending on who wants to show up. And it's totally optional. So if you don't feel like it, I get it. That's totally fine. So we're taking questions, and you can ask questions about the 8-limbed path, the 3 doshas. Maybe an interesting thing to do, Kathy, would be to ask if people who are present here with us tonight, if you know what your Ayurvedic Constitution is. If you have that information, you can put it into the chat. Let's see. Okay, thank you. Kathy's putting into that into the chat. And also, okay, Teresa has mentioned, I'm just going to backtrack a little bit here. I will share that I did share the name for the sutra book, and I have my copy right here. And it's going to be backwards, of course. But this is my copy. You can see it's well worn with lots of bookmarks in it. Because I use it in my teaching all the time to remind my students that it's not just about what's happening on the mat. It's what we're doing in our everyday lives as well. So Patricia said down in the chat that she did find the link. She found it on Amazon. And I also suggest going to the author's website, which is abundantwellbeing.com, because not only can you buy the book directly from her, but you can also get the audiobook or take the online course with her. So I would not miss out on that. She is a lovely, lovely teacher. Angie says, hi, Angie. She is Vata with Pitta close behind. Yes, I know Angie has been learning a lot about the doshas lately, right? So this is an important season for you, Angie, because we are shifting from a Pitta season, summer, to fall. And this is when things can get really interesting, right? Hi. So, right. So for you, it's almost like observing both those energies almost equally. It can be maybe even a day-to-day practice. So you're welcome to share about that if you want to. If you want to share anything, you're still on mute. You're welcome to unmute just for a moment. If you wanted to share anything, I'm going to scroll down here. Hi.
Yeah, it is interesting moving into this season, because I've noticed a few shifts already in how my body's reacting to stuff. But when I think about Pitta, like if I use my infrared sauna, or if I take a bath, trying to make sure that I'm doing things to keep that Pitta, that heat under control. So it's just awesome knowledge. And it's basic, but it's not basic. It doesn't have to be that difficult. So it's been amazing.
Thank you, Angie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Right, this can be a very challenging time for, like Kathy chats here that she's Vata Pitta. So what I didn't talk about as much is that you can have two doshas that are fairly strong in your constitution, right? And so Kathy, what's Kathy saying is that Vata is stronger than Pitta when you see Vata leading the pack. So same for Kathy, this can be a challenging time to recommit to our practices. Karen says that she is strong Pitta with Vata. So it sounds, Karen, like your Pitta is the leader of the pack and Vata is close behind as well. That's great that you know that. And did you take a dosha quiz? You're welcome to use the chat, or you can unmute yourself if you want to mention how you came across that information. Most people are taking dosha quizzes online. Or you might be working with a practitioner or a counselor. And when you work with a practitioner or counselor, you can get much more accurate information. Dosha quizzes online can be a little bit of a toss-up. I've had more people come to me confused more than anything after taking an online quiz. So they're a good starting place. But I think if you're really curious, working with a practitioner can be really helpful. And if you go to our website, wisconsinayurveda.org, did I get that right? I keep getting them switched. You can find a directory of our members who are either practitioners or counselors, or they are body workers. And this does mean that they have some certification from, they have certification that's recognized by NAMA. That's the National Ayurvedic Medical Association. Thank you, Kathy. Kathy chatted our website. If you want to go there, Teresa added the directory page as well. Okay, excellent. I think we just have a few minutes more. So we do have, oh, Karen also chatted. I'm sorry, Karen, I did see this. I've taken the quizzes and have studied a bit using Dr. Frawley's books. Yay, Dr. Frawley is a wonderful author. That's great. So my yoga practice is more yin, often with pranayama. That's wonderful. And knowing your constitution, of course, that can help you, guide, that helps you, figure out what to do and when. And here's that book, actually, by the way, and I'm sorry, it's going to be backwards, but Yoga for Your Type. Yoga for Your Type. It's an Ayurvedic approach to your asana practice. The opening is by Dr. David Frawley. And then a lot of the yoga postures are done by Sandra Summerfield Kozak. But it's a wonderful book, pose by pose, to learn what poses are working with which dosha. It's really, really helpful. So it's not backward. Okay, for some reason, when I see it in my camera, it's backward. Okay, thank you, Teresa. Okay. Anyways, excellent. And this is the book that I use. I've been teaching for Yama Yoga's yoga teacher training for over 10 years. And this is the book that we use so that our future teachers can go forward and bring this knowledge, the Ayurvedic wisdom, to their students, which is really so important. And we have Marietta to thank. I hope she watches this recording. To thank for that. She is also a Kanyakumari graduate and is the director of Yama Yoga and their teacher training. And I've been honored to be working with her for many years. Okay, we do have a couple more slides. Kathy, these last couple of slides are pretty simple, but I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay.
Okay.
If you want to go to the next one.
Yes, there we go.
There are the other websites. They've been coming up in the chats for you, other than knowing that you can find us also on Facebook at Wisconsin Ayurveda. So please go into Facebook and then click on to become a part of that group. And then also through PayPal at the WI Ayurveda. And that would be for anything that you would like to do as far as any contribution for this webinar. So we do appreciate that to be able to continue again with where our mission is. But Heather, thank you for the presentation. It was fantastic. And it was a great, again, uniting between yoga and Ayurveda.
Thank you, Kathy, for being our host. And thanks to everyone here who showed up, and for those who are going to be watching at a future date. Thanks for being here, and stay tuned for more from us from AAW. So that is it for tonight, and have a great evening. Thank you again. Namaste.
Namaste.
Okay, that was just one more slide. I was confused there. I thought there were 2 more slides, but
did you turn off the recording?
oh, thank you.
Okay, just
I'm
checking.
doing that now.